So I will start by sharing, of course, the first appreciation to all the guests that are joining us live today. Of course, not to mention those that will be watching us in the recording mode, let's say. And first and first, I would like to pinpoint this technical note that we are recording this conversation. So please, if you don't want to pop in our recording video, and you don't want to ask a question or pop out on our a public video that we'll be sharing afterwards. Keep your camera closed and yeah, try to place your question in the chat section. Other than that, of course, everybody is welcome to share feedback, to ask questions. At the end of our conversation, we will have a dedicated 15 minutes of question and answers. Of course, if you put your questions before, we will make sure to read them out loud so David can have an answer on those questions. I will not lose too much time in introducing NSSG, as I hope that everybody knows by now who we are. I will just briefly mention the fact that we're a risk management company, and we've committed ourselves to provide the type of support, peer support, and knowledge sharing opportunities into the risk management industry, of course, with the purpose of empowering our peers and risk management and private security professionals in navigating safely through the complex global risk environment. Together with us, we always try to bring those professionals that have a thing to say in this industry. And of course, they're more than happy to join our mission in sharing their knowledge. Today, as a guest speaker, we have David Sarafinas, founder and president at Global Ground Truth. And what can I say about David in a few words is the fact that he's had that type of experience that you're looking for when you need to draft a travel risk management policy that will keep you safe from troubles. So David had worked with major international companies operating at international level, and of course through these companies also supported thousands of smaller businesses that were looking to provide that safe, let's say, place for their compliance requirements, duty of care, and travel risk management solutions. Of course, this conversation will not be possible without the support of my colleague Joe Frederick, senior consultant at NSSG, and the person that I like to say that is my role model in showing how the global events and geopolitical events are impacting on business. He knows how to trace this line very, very easily for us to follow. So thank you also, Joe, for joining us. As already anticipated by the title, our discussion today will be focused on the travel risk management practice. And I will now pass the microphone to a smarter person than myself. Joe, please, the microphone is yours.
You're too kind, Lily. You're too kind. Thank you very much for that introduction, Lily. Yeah, travel risk management. And we have today a very special guest, David Sarafinas. And as Lily mentioned, he's the founder of Global Ground Truths, US-based travel risk management company. More specifically, I would say Boston-based global travel risk management company, and we'll get a little bit into kind of Boston and some of Boston's sports teams, one of which I follow very closely. So David has decades of experience in the industry. I think that he's been kind of spearheading some of the kind of innovative shifts in the industry in response to global crises, I'd say. And also been part of some creative solutions as well in order for like businesses and organizations to be able to kind of travel. And we'll kind of get into a lot of that. We've got a lot of ground to cover here. But first, before we get into the topic at hand, I'd like to discuss some more pressing issues, David, and that is the collapse of the Boston Bruins after a historical season.
Right.
They completely dropped the puck, if you will, in the first round
Yeah.
to the Florida Panthers, who are now in the kind of the finals now, which is good, but unbelievable that they collapsed after the season.
Yeah. Well, they've changed the logo for the Boston Bruins to the choke sound.
That's very appropriate for the season as well. So maybe we could be kind of influential and kind of changing the choke sign from something more positive. So yeah, and then now we've got the Boston Celtics as well.
Yeah,
Crashed out the
who's
playoffs.
also choked.
So I guess you got the upcoming football season to look forward to, and maybe later on down in the season we'll get back together and talk sports again. So before we go further down this rabbit hole, let's get back to the topic at hand, and that is travel risk management. Talking about kind of shifts in the industry, some of the kind of creative solutions that you've seen, and I think first off, we're kind of now 3+ years since the onset of the pandemic, and arguably the pandemic was a global crisis, kind of felt by everyone in the sense that there's a lot of layers to cover with this, right? From the kind of geopolitics to the kind of supply chain to the social, the economics, but we're going to drill down into where we're experts at, and that's travel. So what did you notice about the pandemic and how travel risk management companies, how their clients and how governments, how did they respond to that basically? So from your perspective, what did you see?
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunate as we all remember, travel grinded to almost a standstill, but companies still had to stay in business and they had to quickly pivot to implement protocols just to keep their businesses open. We saw a large spike in calls to human resources. Um, Questions like, my daughter may have been exposed to someone with COVID. Should I come to work? What should I do? Where should I go? And the phone lines were completely flooded. So instantly, the industry set up what we call COVID helplines to take the stress off human resources departments and kind of get some protocol deployed to these callers. And with medical teams backing that up, we were able to then say, look, let's get you a referral, let's get you an appointment regardless of where you are in the world, early days. And that took a huge stress off of HR departments, putting those medical helplines together. Then the next thing was, well, you'll need a PCR test in order to board a flight. Where am I going to get a PCR test? So what we saw, in fact, one of the organizations I worked with is setting up PCR testing stations in airports, specifically, Heathrow and many airports, if not all airports in the UK, airports in the United States and various other countries where a traveler could go to the airport a couple hours ahead of time or so, get a COVID PCR test, get the certificate, and then be able to board the flight and get to where they needed to be going. But the next problem was, well, where do I find a PCR test if there's none available at the airport? And then organizations started to create mobile apps which could identify where you could get a PCR test. As we know, further down the line, the PCR test was then, allowed to be having an antigen test versus a PCR test. So that became a lot easier as we were able to send test kits to individual travelers, perhaps the day before. They would then take the test in the privacy of their own home or hotel, and through video chatting, a medical team could authenticate that the test was done, it was a negative test, and then issue a certificate via email. So again, the traveler could get on the flight. So those are three of the main, I think, areas where COVID played a role. instituting new services.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But the other thing is too, expats and travelers who were in a different country other than home country, particularly in countries that had limited health resources, they were kind of stuck. So if they got COVID and they tested positive, great. I mean, you have COVID, but what are you going to do now if your symptoms got worse? Where are you going to go? So the medical assistance industry would be able to say, look, we can get you admitted to this hospital, but sometimes that's not the case. Many hospitals lack the oxygen. They ran out of it. They simply couldn't get it. So a traveler and expat were stuck in a situation where they couldn't get medical care. And what that did was it spurred the invention of a remote site clinic where organizations would have a clinic built in an area where they have a significant footprint in that particular area of the world, where they would have doctors, testing, oxygen, and anything that you might find in an ICU or an emergency room, um, you know, right there at that location, perhaps a manufacturing plant or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so the medical assistance company was forced to kind of make some shifts as well as kind of the traditional travel risk management companies and also security companies like NSSG that kind of gets involved in travel or offers travel risk management services.
Right.
A couple of things you mentioned there that kind of highlight the whole duty of care aspect, right, of organizations, governments, etc. And then the other part is, I guess, continuing on the medical assistance side, is that I think another innovation in the industry where was seeing some companies kind of start where they would provide kind of, I guess, evacuation services, for lack of a better term. So, and that was to kind of bypass, I guess, the kind of the red tape or the bureaucracy of medical assistance and insurance, because, once you kind of dial up your medical assistance company, there's a period of Q&A, right? And usually devolve kind of costs, insurance, are you covered, are you not covered, basically, the limits of services themselves. Whereas some companies had developed during this period, during the early part of the lockdowns of the pandemic, where their service was, right, you don't want to be treated in a hospital in country X, we can get you to your home country, and all you have to do is pay a kind of subscription, if you will, of a couple $100 or maybe a couple $1,000 basically. So it bypasses the whole insurance, the bureaucracy. Your company wants to do anything, but you would have to take out these membership as an individual, I'd say. I mean, I thought that was quite innovative development in that time.
Yeah, absolutely right. COVID insurance became a thing. But the caveat was this: if you got COVID and could not get a negative certificate to fly, you were certainly not going to get on a commercial airliner to go home. Number one. Number two is, does it make sense to go home if there's a center of medical excellence close by to where you are? And that's always the controversy in medical assistance industry is, look, yeah, you want to go home. If you're living in Boston, certainly you want to go home and get treated. But is that the prudent thing to do? If you're sick and you're in Europe or some other part of the world, wouldn't a prudent thing to do is be treated right there where you are? In a vetted center of medical excellence, of course, but depending on how sick you are. The other thing too is if you've got COVID, like I said, you're not getting on a commercial airliner, and that's going to necessitate the need for a medicalized jet with all the protocols in place, and that's not going to be cheap. And is that insurance policy going to cover that? So there's a lot of things that you have to look at before you check off the box and say, yeah, let me buy COVID insurance. Because it simply could be once you start to test negative, then they will fly you home. So a lot of things that we have to look at with respect to that type of insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to kind of ask one more question about something COVID related, as well as a question about duty of care. So right now, there are reports coming out of China where there's they're kind of recording 65 million cases a day of a kind of new strain of COVID. And, it seems like COVID is kind of creeping back into our lives, right? So undoubtedly, we probably know someone that just had it recently, basically. So, with respect to kind of how governments and how businesses respond when it comes to travel, do you think that the industry is better prepared, or do you think it'll kind of revert back into the early days where they'll just kind of shut things down again?
Yeah, hopefully organizations have created pandemic planning and they've gone through this and they understand what went wrong and what went right. But as history will tell you, within about a year or two, nobody's going to think about it anymore. These pandemic plans that they've created are going to collect dust and they're not going to refresh them. They're not going to exercise them, as we saw after SARS. Same thing. People aren't going to pay attention to it until it's right there, right there in your face. But savvy stakeholders that have been through this a couple of times, they will update their pandemic plan depending on what's going on at that particular time. I think medical assistance companies and travel risk management companies will start to, in the background, create new tools, help organizations, kind of exercise their pandemic plans. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And let's face it, COVID's not going away. It's going to be here. And like you indicated, it's going to come back in waves with different variances and different strains, what have you. It may not be COVID. It might be something else at some point in time, but that kind of stuff is really here to stay. One thing I also want to add too is a lot of organizations have people working remotely. So if you were, for example, a citizen of Canada, and you wanted to just hang out in Hawaii for the summer and work remotely from there, and this is an actual case that I was involved in too, if that individual got sick and they were relying on their BTA, a business travel accident plan, they were out of luck because they're not an expat and they're not a business traveler. They're technically really on vacation. They're on leisure travel. So we got caught with a lot of those situations with remote workers not being in their home country, not being covered by their corporate insurance policy. So my recommendation to many of my clients would be, look, add leisure travel, very insignificant amount of money with respect to the overall policy, add leisure travel to the BTA, and regardless of where they are or what they're doing, they're going to be covered.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of instills confidence in this whole duty of care notion, doesn't it? That the employee has better confidence in the employers, basically, if they extend a business trip for a few days to kind of hang out in Oahu and sip some Mai Tais and whatnot. So I get all that, and the cost to them is quite nominal. But I guess on the flip side, when you talk about this cost containment, right? Because we're now in this kind of economic era of potential still disruption from events happening in Ukraine, for example. Inevitably there's going to be another crisis down the road. Basically, I mean, thankfully in the U.S., they agreed on the kind of debt ceiling limit, right? And so, but had they not agreed on that, then everyone was predicting kind of cataclysmic kind of disruption to the global economy, basically. And so, but we're still kind of dealing with kind of inflationary pressures, right, across the world, basically. And that means that companies are looking for ways to not necessarily cut costs, but kind of contain them, basically. And so, and with this whole kind of hybrid work model, it seems as if I can go into London today and the streets are becoming more full with kind of daily workers, basically, and it seems like these companies are not necessarily getting rid of the kind of hybrid work model, but they are kind of asking their employees to come to the office, not 1 day a week, not 2, not 3, but maybe kind of 4 or 5 days a week, basically. And the rationale is, if we're paying, kind of these really expensive kind of realty rates, then we need the kind of justification, basically, and get people in the office. And so do you think kind of once people get back into kind of working in the office 5 days a week, uh, combined with this kind of, bleisure type coverage, basically, do you think that will kind of get like erode away, or will we go back to business as normal, or will that kind of leisure policy still stay in effect, basically?
Yeah, from experience, 9 out of 10 times, if an employee gets hurt or sick overseas on vacation, on leisure travel, the company's going to pay for it. They're not going to say, "Gee, sorry. Let me know how you handle that. We expect you to work as soon as possible." That's never going to happen. Um, the organization is going to take that altruistic attitude and say, "Look, we're going to take care of this." But note to self, we should look into leisure travel.
Yeah.
In almost every conversation I've had with a client, I've always brought up the subject of add leisure travel, because something happens to any employee while they're on vacation, you're going to want to help them out. Um, and I think it's leaning towards becoming default at this point. Um, I think it's going to be something that, look, there are more than one insurance companies out there that sell these types of insurance policies. As a consultant, I put them against each other and say, look, come up with the best deal with the same set of coverages, include leisure travel, and check off all the boxes, and the stakeholders can sleep well at night knowing no matter what happens, it's going to be covered. That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of maybe, yeah, thank you for that. I'd like to kind of maybe shift track here. So, in talking about kind of what security risk management companies, have done, I guess a good segue is like in the COVID period, and what they can do in the future, basically. And so, at NSSG, you mentioned some of the things about kind of remote medical clinics and whatnot, moving medication in and out of like areas on behalf of clients, or on behalf of like maybe medical assistance companies or other kind of travel management companies that couldn't do it, where we have some case studies where we did do that. So I'd like to get your kind of thoughts and opinions on what security providers can do with respect to travel risk management.
Yeah. So, what is often the problem is not the assistance providers, but with the client travel security stakeholders. What I've seen throughout the decades I've been in this industry is they'll select one overall travel risk management provider and assume that they're going to take care of everything all the time, 24/7. But as we know from experience, what ends up happening is a major event, a tsunami, a volcanic gas situation, or a terrorist event, or whatever the case may be. And generally, um, a travel risk management company doesn't have the bandwidth or the surge capacity, um, and it takes them a while to develop a strategy to get their people out of harm's way. So what I feel, the stakeholder, the travel security manager needs to be doing is create other avenues, plan B, plan C, plan D, to be able to pinpoint specific niche, regional, local providers to call upon to help them out during instances where their overall travel risk management company can't get it done, just too many people to take care of, etc. So obviously, the travel risk management companies have to react to an incident. They themselves get caught off guard. Things happen very quickly. They're not prepared for it. So I think it's a good idea for the security teams to have relationships with other organizations, not only service providers like NSSG, but regional security offices at the embassies, diplomatic security people. Take a look at your own home country and form relationships with local law enforcement, FBI, your regional FBI, um, people, your state police people, because things are going to happen which are not necessarily tied to an international event. They're going to happen right here in your home country, as we see in the United States all the time. So it's a good idea to have that relationship with these local law enforcement providers, as well as diplomatic security overseas. And you really should be planning for every contingency, much like a sports team
Hmm.
that practices plays for things that will never happen or rarely ever happen. We've seen the New England Patriots win a Super Bowl based on a play at the end of the game that they practiced the week before that had a 0.1% chance of ever happening. So, um, exercise crisis management plans, do mock drills, and I do a lot of mock drills and mock crises, things of that nature. And just you may never use it, but just have it, somewhere in the back of your mind that this is what we're going to do if X, Y, Z happens. So I think in my mind, the security teams need to take a look at other options, Plan B, C, and D.
Yeah, I think having options is quite a smart thing to do. And I was looking at this slide here, and our great CEO, Alessandro Martello, has a quote, why do people fail to prepare for rain when there are clouds on the horizon and the wind is blowing towards us?
Perfect.
That's a very appropriate question applicable to anyone in the kind of risk management kind of industry or has a risk management function, basically. But yeah, I think options are definitely kind of something everyone should have, basically. And the idea of, or the practice of kind of, wargaming these things, right? So going through various scenarios to see, what you're good at, or what are these kind of vulnerabilities you have that you can kind of, remedy in some way or another. So when you're looking at kind of these options, these kind of security providers or security risk management providers, what do you take into consideration when you kind of look at them?
Yeah, if I'm a travel security manager or a practitioner, um, my first go-to point is a colleague in another company. They have these informal associations, if you will, and everybody knows they're there. Amazon will talk to Google, GE will talk to Raytheon, etc. And OSAC is a perfect venue for that type of thing. GSX as well, where they say, what do you guys do in a situation like this, or who do you use? So that's one. Who is everybody leaning towards? That's number one. Reputation means everything. If you've screwed up at least once, you may not be used again, and that's going to come out. Um, the second thing is, look, do your vetting, do your homework, do your due diligence. Go meet these people. Don't sit there and phone in an interview and, you know, like so many people do when vetting medical providers. Get in there, take a look at it, bring a clipboard, ask many questions, meet the owner and the founder of the organization, see how they operate, get some references, and do really, really deep dive. Because if something goes wrong, you have one opportunity to get that done right. And if you've selected the wrong vendor, um, you're going to pay for that reputationally. So yeah, do the due diligence.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. One thing that we mentioned previously in our discussions, David, and one thing that's really important to us, and our CEO keeps going on about this, is about kind of culture, basically. And so, organizational culture, right? You know, Organizational culture, but kind of regionalized culture. Where are these kind of risk management companies based? We're headquartered in Romania, and we've got offices kind of scattered throughout. Basically, you've got some really credible organizations in other countries as well, and that's the kind of perception of risk, right? And so, if I work for a multinational company, basically revenue in the billions, and I'm in charge of kind of a travel risk management function, and as a kind of cost containment kind of effort, if I've got like a limited budget, for example, it would make more sense for me to kind of reach out to my network of people of providers that are spread globally and kind of make things run more efficiently, right? Because those people situated in Italy or in South Africa know the culture very well. I mean, they'll be able to tell you, yes, you need a B6 armored vehicle, or no, you don't need to go, B6, but use a soft skin, et cetera, basically. And so, I mean, how much does culture kind of factor into your kind of vetting process?
Yeah, absolutely. if you're trying to dial it in from the United States, talking to somebody in an African nation and trying to get things done, probably not going to work, regardless if you're in security or medical or any industry, right? So you need that local expert on the ground on your team. And in the absence of that, I'm telling you that the regional security officer at the embassies are really vital in getting information, because they're dealing with corporations, they're dealing with situations taking place, and they see firsthand what's working, what's not working. So they're a very valuable research to say, hey, how do these guys do? Do they have a good track record? Have they made mistakes, etc.? But from a cultural perspective, as you well know, Joe, things are done so differently in other parts of the world than the U.S. And hopefully, if you're a U.S. organization, you have regional security managers around the world. And hopefully, you've selected those who are very entrenched in that region and understand it well and know the cultural pitfalls, and can pull levers and pull strings and get things done. Um, you'll obviously have your travel risk management company who has a duplicate type of footprint, but again, going to Plan B, you'll also want to know who you can reach out to directly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think dealing with RSOs or kind of getting in good relations with RSOs is a kind of I think very critical for organizations, especially those organizations uh, operating in kind of, I don't know, very unfamiliar environments, basically. And so RSOs are a very good source of information. They're well plugged into local networks, but regional networks as well. You can get a lot of information from from the local RSO. I definitely agree with that. Let's make another shift, David, and let's talk about kind of technology and kind of looking at the future, basically. And so, I would say over the past kind of 20 years or so, there's been a lot of kind of innovation in the travel risk management industry, technological innovation, I would say. And for lack of a better term, everything kind of revolves around the whole travel tracker, right? Or the people locator, or the kind of asset protection kind of app, if you will. And so um, you know there were a few players at the very beginning, that maybe one or two players at the very beginning that had developed these kind of systems. I mean, they're still here today, but then a lot of other companies developed similar systems and platforms, basically. Some more better than others. Some have bells and whistles. Some are very limited in what they do. But what have you seen in kind of technology, and where's the TRM industry going with respect to technology?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to take a walk down memory lane here, um, a lot of innovation were as a result of what happened on 9/11, on September 11th, 2001, where you know the industry was just starting to get PNR data, travel data from global distribution systems and travel agencies, and it was a nice way to send out pre-trip advisories or automated travel advisories. We knew somebody was flying from Boston to Lisbon, um, so we wanted to provide them with some information, do's and don'ts, health concerns, food and water precautions, blood supplies, security type information. And that was all well and good until September 11th happened, and the FBI and FAA froze global distribution systems like Sabre, or even American Express, the largest travel management company in the world, was unable to find out where their people were. So what that ended up happening, and I was right there in the middle of this when this is happening. So what we were able to do then is create Excel spreadsheets, send those to organizations. Here's the good news. Here's where your people are. Until I reached a client who had lost 7 people on that first flight. And it was a tough discussion. The good news is here's where all your people are. The bad news is you've lost many people on that first flight. That caused me to have a conversation with the client about, wow, if you had a graphical front end to this thing, you'd be able to know instantly where your people are. Wouldn't have changed things, obviously, but at least you would know very quickly. And that enabled me to start the ball rolling and get people in the IT division to create a map with dots on it. It was the very first travel tracker in the industry, perhaps. And the ball started rolling from there, because then all of a sudden the innovation started to take place. Of course, people started hiring in the United States anyways, former FBI, diplomatic security, former CIA. They were starting to really ramp up the security end of things because of 9/11. And that brought new innovation and new thinking to the table, which caused other innovations such as pre-trip approval process called Travel Ready, where I was involved in that at the very beginning, where somebody would say, look, I don't have the capacity to monitor where all my people are going, and I want to make sure that they're prepared to go somewhere, because a lot of them are falling through the cracks. And we don't have the time to sit down with them one at a time, giving them a security briefing and a medical briefing. So the pre-trip approval process was created around probably 2003, 2004, which set up an automated process that kind of works like this. An individual would normally go to their online booking tool, book a trip to, just say, Mexico City, get their ticket, get on the plane, away they go. If something should happen, they'd get an email alert or a text message letting them know. And of course, they may be totally unprepared. So what this process would do is start with filling out a pre-trip approval form, which would go to different levels in the organization. If it was a low to moderate country, it could go to your supervisor, and they're aware of it. And they may make the determination is really, nothing more to do because it's a low risk country, and just make sure your app is turned on, etc. But once it got to a high risk destination, then the policy would invoke different processes. It would then go to your regional division manager for an approval, and the policy could state you'll have to have a security briefing, you'll have to do e-learning, you'll have to have a medical briefing, and you'll have to do some other things. The form might have you fill out, when does your passport expire? Oops, I forgot about that. When does your visa expire? Oops, I forgot that I even needed a visa to go to Brazil. Things like that. And so that kind of took care of that. It forced people to comply with the policy, so the stakeholders weren't finding themselves in a tough spot with somebody stuck at the airport or stuck overseas because they didn't know enough to take mitigating steps. Fast forward, 5 years ago, the groundbreaking technology was social media monitoring. Okay, and the companies that provide this, where there'd be some chatter on Instagram or Facebook, etc., where people could set up filters, or security stakeholders or travel risk management providers could set up filters where they would be alerted to keywords in social media in this specific part of the country or the world, which would get them to take a closer look and do a deeper dive. And that was groundbreaking back in the day. So then, your security analysts could, go to their sources and what have you, and do a deeper dive, and then recommend maybe an alert be posted to people traveling to that particular location. Nowadays, we have artificial intelligence, machine language, AI, right? That's going to change the whole spectrum of what we're going to be doing here. It's going to be able to get massive volumes of data that can be harnessed to provide real-time assessment. With social media monitoring, there was mandrolics, if you will. People had to get involved, they had to be alerted, they had to take a closer look, and it might take an hour or two to be able to get an alert posted. With the advent of AI, that can now be done automatically. It can take a look at all the social media chatter. It can take a look at historical events that have taken place. It can use algorithms to determine what's the likelihood of something like this taking place, and then automatically alerting people based on travel data and location data based on GPS on apps. So it can really do the job of maybe 5 security stakeholders and professionals and practitioners to speed up the process. Um, I think we're going to see that come down the pike in about a year.
Yeah, I mean, just like COVID and breathing, AI is here to stay, isn't it? And so I think the main concern now is the pace of development and innovation, basically, and that was sparked from like ChatGPT, wasn't it? So
Yep.
towards the latter half of last year, and so it's developing at such a rapid pace that nobody can seem to keep up with what it can do. And government, now you've got these kind of industry titans stepping in and saying, hey, yeah, we help develop AI, we help develop these platforms. Oh, and by the way, maybe we should slow the pace down a bit, and maybe we need some regulation around it, right? Because right now we're kind of we're kind of going into kind of uncharted territory with AI, and I know that there are companies out there that are kind of using platforms like ChatGPT for the day-to-day business processes. But with respect to kind of the travel risk management industry, um, have you seen any kind of innovation, or how receptive is the TRM industry with respect to kind of AI? Because I know if you have like interactive AI, there's the issue of data privacy, right? And you've got GDPR and all those compliance issues. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is going to be a struggle, much like we saw way back in early 2000s with travel tracking and all that sort of stuff. Um, safe harbor compliance and all that. This, it's probably Germany's going to probably lead the way, but there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, press the pause button. We need to really take a look at the ramifications. You hear Elon Musk talking about this all the time. He's afraid of what's going to happen. And many um, brilliant people are feeling the same way. We're unleashing a genie out of the bottle, can't put it back in. Um, so there's going to be a lot of rigorous debate over how can this thing be monitored and harnessed, if you will, for exactly like you said, for data privacy reasons. We're also going to see this for telemedicine. I think telemedicine, this is where AI will play a vital role. And I hope it doesn't slow down, because this is a situation where tying AI to a telemedicine type tool can arguably diagnose someone better than an actual doctor.
Mm,
I think they've done studies and tests, and they're coming to realize that AI has so much more data to bring to the table, where an individual doctor, as brilliant as they are, can't possibly, you know, keep all that data in their brain. So perhaps using it in addition or augmenting a medical doctor quickens up the pace. I think the usage would be someone in a remote location, literally hundreds of miles from the nearest hospital, maybe working on an oil rig or a mine or somewhere far away, where telemedicine augmented with AI can produce not only a very accurate diagnosis, but what to do, helping the paramedic on the ground uh, and giving them guidance. Look, this is what you should be doing to treat this particular individual immediately. You can also see down the road where this can be tied in to an alert system, contacting an ambulance company, contacting the closest medical center, contacting the stakeholders at the hospital, at the organization, as well as the hospital, as well as the travel risk management company, I mean, you can see that this thing could be like all in one type of service.
Yeah.
We're probably years away from that, but that's what I envision saying.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, AI has its benefits, and you could see certain gaps that it could fill rather quickly. You can see certain kind of efficiencies that it can make, both on the kind of client side as well as kind of the provider side. But I kind of come at this with, and maybe this kind of ages me a bit, but going back to the film 2001 and HAL, right? So the kind of AI computer that takes over a spaceship and kind of kills everyone on board, basically. So, I don't think we're kind of headed down that scenario at all. But I think the word is kind of caution, basically, and maybe like cautious optimism, right? So, maybe some regulation does need to be introduced because, you're going to have a lot more companies out there, developing really clever kind of algorithms that could do just about everything.
Right.
And then, what that spawns and its kind of, subsequent generations of that algorithm, is left up to everyone's imagination, basically. And so, but I agree, it has its benefits in kind of telemedicine. It has its benefits in kind of, the situational awareness piece. And I think from a kind of an HR perspective, I don't think that AI here is going to kind of eliminate kind of millions of jobs across the planet. And for those people that security analysts or kind of junior doctors, I wouldn't have this kind of worry. But maybe a kind of next stage in their career, something they should be aware of is how to use AI, to kind of benefit their careers, to kind of benefit the services that they provide to their stakeholders, if you will. So
Much like doctors today, now they all have a laptop and they know how a drug is going to interact with other drugs that they're using. It's just a gradual, change in the way they do things, and they'll adapt, but they'll never be obsolete.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Right.
it's a tool, right? And so yes, I think AI has its huge benefits, but I also think that again, we do need to kind of slow down the pace of kind of development as well. And I think,
Here's,
go ahead.
yeah. Here's another thing that's vitally needed in travel risk management, particularly medical assistance, because I've seen this for decades and decades. Um, an employee gets evacuated, they get diagnosed, they get evacuated, and the client, all they want is, look, call me with updates on a regular basis. That's not happening in many cases in this industry because they themselves don't know where the patient is. They can't get a hold of the treating doctor. They're trying their best, but a lot of times the doctors, they just, not they're reluctant to have to talk to a travel risk management company, medical assistance company. So what I see is AI, um, and this is going to take some serious firepower to get this done because of patient confidentiality. But I could see where a case is generated and created, where it tracks that patient and automatically updates the client as well as GDPR will and HIPAA will allow, but to let the client automatically know what's the status of their employee. Uh, when it leaves the clinic, and the clinic says, wow, this guy's having a heart episode, to the point that the individual gets in an ambulance, to the point that they get transferred to a center of medical excellence, to the point where they get admitted, to the point where they've scheduled some surgery. All that information can be harnessed, and the client stakeholder, typically HR, will be automatically notified. And that's going to keep them very happy because, of course, they have to notify family members. So I see that coming down. Where is the patient specifically right now, this second? And that's something that's lacking in the industry right now. And I
Okay.
think that's going to come a long way.
So something kind of tied to a travel tracker app, for example, or
Exactly. Short of putting a chip in somebody's neck, which will probably happen, this might be the answer.
yeah, maybe like next year's Christmas gift, those microchips installed in people's brains, right? So Elon Musk can dream.
Please don't shoot the messenger. We will have to jump into the question and answers session, but not before. I would like you, David, to have a conclusion shared with us. And I usually like to, of course, with seasoned, experienced professionals like you, I like to for you to look back and look at the David 30 years ago, and send a message to David 30 years ago on what would be the main focus as a travel risk management practitioner to follow, to be focused on.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, and it's about forming relationships with people that are going to be able to help you out down the road. If you go to a certain country and fail to meet with the RSO or fail to meet with a provider that you think could help you, next time you call, he's going to go, David, who? Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't take the call, right? You know, I know one particular practitioner who I've worked with for decades who is absolutely amazing at this. And everywhere they go, they spend an extra day meeting these types of people, going to lunch or dinner, forming that robust relationship, because when you need them and you pick up the phone, you're going to get some help. I would say that's the number one thing, relationship building, for sure.
Yeah, it's about the people, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing these valuable advices with us. If there are any questions from the public, we are now in the juicy, let's say, part of our meeting. You can throw questions at David. I already picked up one from the chat. Robert is thanking us for the interesting remarks and asks about, from your experience, if the type of leisure travel insurance is also, if it's also covering injuries or small incidents, if this is the case.
Oh, absolutely. When you buy a BTA, a business travel accident program, generally it covers business travel. It can come with 100 miles away from your home, right? A lot of times it's just outside your home country, but you want to stipulate, I want it covered 100 miles from my home. So if I'm living in Boston and have an incident in LA, I'm covered. You want to make sure that's done. There are also some you know, areas that are not covered, or exclusions, I guess, if you call them exclusions. The typical exclusions are psychiatric conditions, AIDS, HIV, third trimester of pregnancy, things of that nature. You want to be sure to kind of carve them out and waive those exclusions. Now we start to talk about leisure travel, and you want to duplicate what you have for business travel to leisure travel. So maybe there's a limit of liability up $500 and beyond, or $500 and below. The individual traveler has to pay out of their own pocket. But yeah, it'll cover incidents as you know, I have a cold, I have a flu, I sprain my knee, all the way up to a heart attack and a stroke, needing a full-blown medical evacuation to the tune of $150,000. It's going to cover pretty much everything.
I see. Until someone courageous raises the hand for a question, I have one besides what I picked up from the chat. So, David, you had this interesting remark regarding the membership products versus insurance policies, and beside this type of legal frameworks that encourage and somehow push the companies to do their duty of care, what else would you think that it's increasingly critical, becoming increasingly critical in this global risk environment for companies to make sure they have for their employees?
Yeah, I mean, alongside of your basic medical assistance and security assistance, and then like I talked about Plan B, C, D, you know, the niche, regional, specialized companies. In addition to that, I think there's a need for more medical pre-trip planning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of let's say sites out there like ProMed and GeoSentinel and Blue Dot that provide alerting or trends, if you will, for emerging diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I think what needs to happen is again not relying solely on your overall travel risk management program, but again, like another Plan B or C on the medical side, um, get a subscription to some of these other medical alerting systems that can tell you, look, um, we're seeing dengue fever in this particular city at a very alarming rate. Before your travel risk management company can send you that alert, you might know about it sooner. And again, form that relationships with those people on the ground and to be able to say, look, we have a manufacturing plant in that city. Let's pull out the contingency plan. Let's pull out the plan and see what we're supposed to do before the world finds out about it. Okay? So if you're seeing something emerge, um, take adequate steps before it starts to become a major problem. Because as you know, that's going to affect supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to affect, absenteeism. It's going to affect morale. So if you're seeing something like that, and I've seen a lot of companies do this, is shift your manufacturing focus to a different city. Close this one down for a certain amount of time and redistribute the workload to another manufacturer or somewhere else. But you need to have another option to get, medical intelligence from, companies like ProMed, Blue Dot, GeoSentinel, et cetera. And then, you have these policies in place. Companies have these policies in place that say you need to do this, you need to do that. They have a pre-trip approval process and blah blah blah. And a lot of that stuff kind of goes by the wayside, and it doesn't really get enforced. Uh, for example, the big one is having too many people on the same flight at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
particularly very senior level people. Um, I know of a company who had 75% of the plane filled with their own people. The plane almost crashed. And if people had died on that plane, they would have lost their entire senior leadership. Um, it becomes a
Wow.
political issue. It becomes a situation where, well, I can't tell these people not to fly together. You know, there's got to be some way where you sit there and say, look, just like CEOs need protection, executive protection, even though they don't want it, you're not protecting you, you're protecting the stock price,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're protecting your stockholders, and it's your obligated duty, fiduciary responsibility to make sure the company is running the way it should be in the event of death of senior level people. So don't think about it as egotistical. Think about it as what would my stockholders want me to do, right?
That's a very interesting insight that you just brought there, David. This is definitely prevention should be the number one, let's say, activity that we should be doing, especially in such a volatile environment and with all the global events impacting on our businesses. Thank you so much for joining. I see that there are no other questions. Joe, if you have any other last remarks, questions you want to share with David.
And I do have a lot of questions for David, but I realize we have to conclude this. So
Maybe we'll do another episode. How's that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
so, because you
Definitely.
talked about something that I've been kind of interested in, that's the whole medical intelligence side. So, but we can talk about that later.
So a second, a sequel to this conversation definitely will have to happen, and the environment will be a bit different because we will have to switch to the TRM show. Correct? That's
That's right.
David's project. Please, David, talk a bit about your project. Tell the people where they can find more information about the TRM show, a podcast that I think will grow greatly into this industry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lily, for mentioning it. But the TRM show is an informational and fun podcast that brings on stakeholders and subject matter experts, that we have conversations like we do here. So if you go to my LinkedIn page, and you'll see under posts, you'll see all the different episodes that I've produced, including cybersecurity, pre-travel planning. The last one I talked about was with a brilliant PhD that I had the pleasure of working on in a project about medical content and information and intel and that sort of thing. You can also find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. You can just type my name in there and you'll find the TRM show. And it's a lot of fun. It's a very relaxed atmosphere. I try to bring subject matter experts who know a lot more than I do. We just share information. It's very low key, very conversational. And, if anybody feels that they want to be on the show, all they have to do is message me and have them on, and we have a nice conversation.
That's really interesting. If you consider them as being more knowledgeable, then definitely that's a show that we need to tune in. Thank you so much, David, for your time, for the willing to share knowledge with our peer fellow security professionals and risk practitioners. Thank you, Joe, for conducting this discussion into a very smart way, smarter than my way. Of course, as I promised, this conversation will be shared with all those that had registered for the webinar, of course placed also in our YouTube channel, and why not also featured in David's social media accounts. Thank you all for joining, and last remarks to you guys.
Last remarks. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, David. I've known you in the industry for quite a long time. It's great to have these kind of discussions with you. I've certainly learned a lot in this kind of hour, but the previous discussions as well. So I'll be sure to check out the TRM show, and I'm sure we can kind of throw some ideas on topics and develop the kind of relationship and discussion topics as well. So thank you very much. Yeah.
And likewise, you guys are brilliant. I love the way you guys work. Love working with you too. And good luck to you both, and hopefully we'll see each other in a little while.